your report, please.
Thank you. I'll take my action item 25073, July 8, 2025. Honorable Board of Commissioners, we authorize chairperson of Hillsdale County Board of Commissioners to sign the lease agreement between the County of Hillsdale and Jackson Hillsdale Community Mental Health Board, DBA Lifeway, for the office building located at 25 Pier Drive, Hillsdale, Michigan 49242 for the term of 1 year, commencing May 1, 2025, respectfully submitted by English Chair, Facilities Committee.
Support. Point of order. Because this resolution was offered and supported at the meeting in April and postponed to today, the motion and support from there carried forward to today.
Do we need to take it off the table, or
It was not
Never tabled, it was postponed until July 8th.
Today.
So the point of order is.
so I bring the resolution as proposed and passed at our previous meeting.
I have some questions.
Please.
Commissioner Ingalls, in this new lease agreement, where did the number come from for the increase in the annual rental rate? And why was it not based off of the increase stipulation factor that was outlined in the prior lease agreement?
The department had negotiated with Lifeways and came to agreement with Mary Beth, and that includes all of the points in the lease.
Was the finance director consulted regarding the CAM fee?
I do not know.
And why was that increased?
Again, the facilities director negotiated with Lifeways, and Mary Beth, if you look at, if this is the same one that was brought forth before, has been signed by Lifeways, and I do see a signature.
Lifeway's facility meeting last night, this item has been moved to corporate council for review. So there are some questions as far as the CAM rate, there are some questions as far as the accuracy of the number of the increase based on the previous contract. So it's been moved to
So
corporate
it should be
council.
postponed again.
Well, again, Commissioner, to me, the prior contract required that the holdover rate, and even if Lifeway said exercise their option to renew the lease for a 5-year period, the contract required that their annual rental rate be increased by the difference in consumer price index from August of 2020, or April of 2020 to April of 2025. Additionally, working with the finance director, the prior CAM rate that we're at is comparable to our costs that are associated with that building. And that CAM rate language underneath the current lease that is extended on a holdover provision requires that annually there be an accounting on that CAM payment, and if the rate that we're charging on a monthly basis for the CAM is not sufficient, that Lifeways is supposed to pay the additional figure. So to me, there's the rental amount's not enough compared to what the prior rental agreement was, and B, the CAM rate, that figure does not need to be increased because the prior contract language already accounted for if the rate that we're charging is not enough to have that additional funds paid to the county. So
So my question back to you is, we've had this lease for over a month, and these are the first time you've brought these concerns. I'm just thinking that, to me, it's your true statement.
Well, he expressed some of these concerns at the May 13th meeting, that's why it was postponed.
Well, no, it's postponed because of the
it was fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's postponed because of the bond question.
And again,
But, so my question is, if we could have addressed many of these questions, you know, absolutely. And if in fact you say that Lifeways Facilities has questions, then this is not ready to go. And so I, in fact, would withdraw. It's fine.
And my,
It's already been supported, are you okay with withdrawing it?
well, we go back to the original.
Of course,
there's
we've
been
already
debate,
discussed
Commissioner.
it. Pardon me?
There's been debate, so it's too late
Yeah,
to
it's too
withdraw.
late to withdraw.
So my question is that what was the facilities committee at Lifeway's logic when the director of Lifeways has already signed this document? So we have offer and acceptance on part of Lifeways already. What was their logic to go back now and address those questions? Because their director has already signed off on this lease, as we're seeing here today. And so now it's simply for our approval.
I can't speak for Mary Beth, but I know the committee wanted it looked at by corporate counsel.
So if we approve it today, she's already signed off on it.
We got her signature.
And to me, with the holdover provision in the prior lease, there's no reason to do a new lease. We just operate underneath the holdover provision of the prior lease.
Does that have to become a month-to-month lease?
Once month to month, but the holdover provision, which is allowed in the holdover provision, item number 14 of the prior lease agreement. That would put their monthly rental payment at $7,335.53. And leaves the can at $5.25 per square foot.
Yeah, the lease rate that is proposed in the document that you've brought forward is about $8,000, give or take, short of what it should be based on the CPI. So I guess I would have to ask why we're going to short ourselves on the rental rate. So that would be the question for the document itself that's on the table. So I don't know how Randy came up with the 80 or 80,000, but, you know, based on the CPI, which is about 25% over that period of time, the way the lease was written, makes the rent at 88,000. So there's about an $8,000 discrepancy.
I mean, I ran the numbers last night, I think it comes out to $8 and change per foot. That's pretty comparable to commercial rents. Based on the numbers in this lease. So I mean, just I know what I pay, my lease, just when I did renew my lease in my space, and it's pretty comparable. The CAM is pretty comparable.
But the way the current lease is written with the language of the CPI to be figured over the 5-year period, that's where I'm at, Brad, is that doesn't really address the $8 that you're talking about.
Right.
So I'm more concerned about how that number was came from.
And I think the person who answered that is Randy.
Right. So I don't think he's present today. I guess my thought, since we've already debated it, we can't withdraw it, we should vote it down and then bring it back with the correct numbers. That's just my thought. I mean,
The initial concern was the Lifeway's lease expired March 31. The intent was to match up the lease with the letter commissioners had written, I believe it was last November, we authorized a year plus month to month, up to 6 months.
That was your motion,
December.
April, that was your motion on April 9th.
April, so in that regard, that's the, no, we had a letter that we wrote.
Yeah, your motion was April 9th, the letter was in May, the first meeting in May.
April and May, we're talking
Of 24,
24.
Of 24.
yeah. You made the motion April 9th, it was followed up with a
Letter.
resolution, with a letter on maybe April 23rd.
Of 24, correct. So that being said, that is the point of trying to do the lease today, is because they're currently out of lease. The month-to-month holdover, you know, if that's the desire of commissioners, is to let them go month to month. Actually, I think there's, that gives Lifeways a chance to finish their building and move from 25 Care Drive sooner, rather than being committed to a year plus 6 months, you know, months to month, you know, up to. The concern that I have is the renovations that will be required for district court, and having a chance to prepare 25 Care Drive in a timely fashion. That's, you know, so if we can find a way to shorten Lifeway's time in at 25 Care Drive by allowing month to month, you know, that is, you know, more favorable for preparing for our move of district court.
Further discussion?
Well, we're really not gonna shorten that until they get a building.
Well, the elephant in the room though is we need a home for district court. I mean, that's the elephant in the room, that we sold the building, we've gotta find a place to move our district court to. So we need that space. So we do need to keep the incentive on Lifeways to keep moving the wall.
My question is, sorry to interrupt,
No, you're
why was the building sold until we got a plan of where it was gonna go?
exactly my point, Commissioner, when we sold the building, and Commissioner Wiley's point when we sold the building.
And
I mean, that would be my only question, is
Yeah.
why would we sell someplace when we don't know where they're gonna go? And there's somebody already in the building. I mean, why wouldn't we have held on to that until after? I mean, if the building's sold then, it should sell after the building's empty, and there wouldn't be a problem. I mean, I have a hard time comprehending why it was sold prior to them moving to someplace else. That'd be like selling the circuit court and saying, we're gonna move, we just don't know where and when, but it's sold and we've got, what, 6 years you gave them? They gave you, or 5 years?
5.5.
Okay, 5 to 6 years.
We'll round and call it 6.
Right.
You know, I mean,
Well, your point's well taken. Brad and I did vote no, but we're at a point now where the body voted 3-2, and we've gotta get behind it and figure it out.
yep,
But,
no,
but Brad and I agree with you, but, you know,
And that's my only reason, just to echo what Commissioner Wiley said, that I voted in the minority on that vote to sell the building. But now we have to figure out a plan collectively, because we have a responsibility to have a home for our district court. So we have to look out for the interest of Hillsdale County here. And I understand we have a tenant, a long-term tenant. But I also understand that we have to, you know, our first responsibility is not to the tenant, our first responsibility is to the district court, and we have to find a home for it.
So. Refresh my memory, what was is it 1 year?
We're still, right, the lease is 1 year and then month to month for, I believe, 5 months, or, which is not consistent with the resolution from
It's right on the first page.
April of '23.
The end date, the end date is the same.
Yeah, there you go, I was just trying to remember. Thank you, Brad.
You're welcome.
Well, I think that was another, not think, I know that was another concern, discussed last night as far as the time. And the month, which, I think that was, that was another part of the discussion last night at facilities. But like I say, they wanted to run it by corporate and run the numbers and
Your
stuff.
Beth has already signed it. How does that work?
I can't speak for her, I really can't, but I'm just telling you, the facilities committee, because this never came to the facilities committee until last night. So. And that. I've already stated my opinion, it needs to be voted down and corrected, but because the dollar amount even shorts us, Doug, based on the rental rate, and why would we short ourselves? So, in any event,
So it sounds like we're gonna be looking at a new lease.
it might be the new one, just corrected. Or, I mean,
Understood.
it's basically the
It's
same
different
rate.
than what we have here.
As far as the money amount, yes. So, but we've kicked it out, is there further comment, or are we ready to vote for it? Roll call vote.
Commissioner Benzing,
Yes.
Commissioner Langer,
No,
Commissioner Ingles,
Yes.
Commissioner Collins,
No,
Commissioner Wiley.
No. Try and get something at the next meeting, Doug. Because we do need to get something in place, so.
So,
Commissioner, and I would just say, I don't think we do. I think the lease that we're operating is still sufficient because of the holdover provision.
I won't disagree. It's month to month, but based on the conversation last night, they'd like, the facilities committee would like something more rock solid than month to month. So, we'll work on something.
from facilities or from Lifeways?
Both. It needs to be a cooperative effort instead of, so that everybody is in agreement. Please continue, Doug.
Right.
I think that was your only action.
Yes. Okay. Two reports, one on roads, scraping and brine is in progress. Should be complete by the second week in July, so we're right about there. Road commission audit was presented with an unmodified clean opinion, no findings, no comments from the auditor. Commissioners should have received or will receive your copy of the audit report. Have you received it yet?
No, I believe they sent a digital copy to the clerk.
Yeah, I,
And so,
I'll put that.
Hard copies are available.
okay,
Okay.
all right.
All
All right, so that should be in our, I think I saw that, that'll be in our correspondence next meeting, but yeah.
Yes, okay.
Don't they usually mail to each
They
commissioner?
email a report, it's not the full audit,
Oh,
but
okay.
by sending it, they meet the statute by sending it to the clerk, because that statute requires that they provide a copy of that to the board.
I have a hard copy if someone would like to look at it. M99 to begin at the end of July or beginning of August, so look forward to detours, on that part of the road.
What road is that?
M99, the,
South
Yes.
south of Burke, north of Camden, that whole
Okay,
mile will be
okay.
closed.
yeah,
That's where I thought you were talking. Okay,
yes.
thank you.
And they have already started work on that project, just not on the.
They've been working
not-
on it,
Not
yeah.
cutting a highway, they've got the downstream portion
Right.
Yeah.
complete now.
No, it's not.
Well, okay. It's not, okay. It looks, it's a big ditch.
Well, but again, that downstream portion comes up, almost to where the tubes are in the road, and they're not, that contractor's not.
Yeah, they're having to look backwards up to it, so.
He was delayed by Consumers Energy of all places a little bit, because there is a transmission line that is buried where that, part of that drain has to go, so they were waiting for them to shut that off so that they could
Okay.
do that, and they have to cut a driveway yet to finish the drain.
Continues, I went to city council last night, there were many questions on their TAP grant. Remember, TAP stands for Transportation Alternates Program, and that is the road diet through the city of Hillsdale. Question on the funding and the match from the city, 20% of $1 million is $200,000. The question is, the parking lot, near the post office, is that an add-on, which could be an additional $200,000? That was part of the discussion and needs to be resolved with MDOT. Beyond that, the city manager's report, Howell Street in front of the Kiefer House should be open the week of July 22nd. You'll recall that that portion of Howell Street has been closed and blocked off, working on sewer and water lines in that area. They'll open that up and then do a similar part of that project on North Street. So North Street will be closed for a short time and then opened again, hopefully by October. And my final item is August 10th, there will be another train event. And so look forward to seeing the trains and all of the hoopla that goes with the trains on August 10th. That completes my report. If you have any questions, happy to try to answer.
I just had a comment, Commissioner, if you follow the MTA discussion boards at all, there was a recent question from another county, township in another county, in regards to dealing with their road commission. And it was very, very interesting that the poster, the original poster, stated the road commission was very unresponsive and that they only had a mill that generated about $30,000 a year. And then another township within that county said, yeah, the road commission's not really responsive at all. And then another township said, well, we have 2 mills for roads and they are just more than happy to work with us. And I got the impression that if you had a bunch of money, which is kind of the impression I get here, that if you have money to spend with the road commission, you get a lot of response. And if you're Ransom Township, which has $0 to spend even for priming usually, that you don't get a lot of response. So, and I understand it's a partnership. So, but it's interesting. There is nothing new under the sun. That in other counties they have similar, I won't say problems, but challenges in regards to those local townships working with the road commissions.
You know, in attending the 4 years I've been at the road commission as the liaison from this board, the comments have certainly evolved and changed over the years. Initially, the comments were very negative and descriptive of how the roads are, especially of the gravels that we have in our county, are in such terrible condition. And in the last year, and particularly this year, the comments are that our gravels are in very excellent shape. in particular compared to even Lenawee, Jackson, Calhoun, and Branch. The comments over and over are that our gravels are, it's appreciated, the work that our road commission does, so.
And I would agree with you. Thank you.
Any other comments for Doug at this time? And so we will take, and I see Jennifer, Representative Wertz is here. Good morning. We'll take a short break from our agenda and you can,
Are you sure?
yep,
Is that fine? Okay.
I know you've got a schedule to keep, so we'll let you give us an update and then we can ask you questions.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry I'm running a little later. I came from a appointment. We had coffee hours in Branch County with Congressman Wahlberg and Senator Lindsay and myself. So we are on break right now in the House, and so I've been wanting to get to one of your meetings, and today was the first time that it worked with my schedule. So I just wanted to come and kind of share an update, if you followed at all, that what's been going on in Lansing. We are at a bit of a gridlock. We ended, unfortunately, before 4th of July with no resolution to school budget funding, or roads funding, which is what we were really hoping for through the House and what we were trying to negotiate currently with the Senate. I'm gonna be very honest and say, I think it would be prudent to tighten your belts, because there may not be a budget agreed upon until after the October 1st deadline this year. And that is unfortunate. We do have stopgate legislation, kind of what we would call a budget prevention shutdown. Bills that we have passed, and those sit at the Senate. From what we're hearing, the Senate and the governor are also not in agreement. And so maybe the governor is more on the House side right now, I'm not really sure, but depending on who you talk to. So it's really unfortunate. It's unfortunate for schools who depend on us to tell them what their categorical amounts are gonna be and what per pupil funding is gonna be. And they base the budget, they start July 1st with the new fiscal year. So the best that we have been able to kind of say is will be at least the same, more than likely. And then there's some other issues that we were honestly waiting to see what happened at the federal level, to know kind of how that's gonna affect, obviously, Medicaid, Medicare funding moving forward. In the House, I can tell you that our priorities are education and local road funding, and trying to get permanent solutions to funding those things long term. If you drive around and you see on many of our local roads, and this is statewide, I was just up north this weekend, and the lack of local road funding is definitely an issue. We bonded, the governor bonded for funding of all the major infrastructure highways in our state, and so that's why you see a lot of that happening, and there's been a lot of improvement on those things, but that does not help fund the local road infrastructure, bridges, and drainage, which is another big issue in some of these areas as well. So I'm hopeful that maybe we can get those things resolved by the end of July. The House leadership and the Senate leadership are in negotiations. We do have session July 15th and then maybe July 22nd. The Senate did add some days, but in talking with Senator Lindsay this morning, I think that was maybe just to say they were gonna be there as well. We'll see, I guess. So I'm glad to take any questions. Some of you have reached out about some concerns, and so I think we've primarily addressed those to my office, but if you have any other questions, I'm glad to take any feedback or questions from you.
Wasn't there, or maybe that's what you were referring to as far as negotiation on roads, but wasn't there some legislation earlier this year that was gonna funnel some funds to local roads?
Yeah, so I have here a list of accountable and effective government. Trying to get to the one you're asking about, strengthen and empower, our communities and infrastructure. So I can go through all of these and I can tell you legislation that we've put forward that has passed. Back to what you said, in February or March, we passed a bill package that would take the gas tax, the full gas tax credit at the pump, and send that to road funding, and it would be distributed, back to counties and allow townships to use that money as well in their townships to fix roads. But the Senate has not taken any of those bills up. And that's a $3.1 billion road funding package that is for local road and municipality funding.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Brad, go ahead.
Representative, I just wanted to thank you publicly for your support in your first term of the outdoor community and the Hunters of Michigan. I greatly appreciate the legislation that you both introduced and have signed on as a co-sponsor of. There's some good legislation there, and as a hunter safety educator and a longtime outdoorsman, I greatly appreciate your efforts, so thank you. You are to be commended for that.
Thank you. That's something else we're working on as well. But as you mentioned, I did introduce some bills and actually now working, trying to get Farm Bureau and some auto insurance companies on board, because in our area down here, deer is estimated, not only crops, but the amount of car deer accidents that occur annually. And so, trying to find a solution to that and get some movement and traction.
I might add, while you're talking about deer, I would guess Patrick Keyes has reached out to you. You know,
Yeah.
one of the biggest problems is there's no place to process them. There's one place that I'm aware of somewhere in Lenawee County, but that's quite a haul from here. So, even if we are allowed to shoot them this time of year, what do you do with them?
Yeah, and that's an issue. DNR has the trailer, obviously, and you can sign up, but, yeah, they're driving, I believe, up near Kalamazoo with that trailer, at least in Branchton. I don't know where your trailer, that comes out of Jackson. I do have a meeting coming up next week with someone who's looking to open a processing facility in the Manchester area, which I know is still a bit of a drive. Obviously here, we have some local processors, but it is challenging. It is neat, and the biggest issue, the holdup there that we hear over and over is with Eagle and the water permitting requirements there. And so that's something that has been also legislation that we're working on. Again, unfortunately, we've only passed, I think, I saw the headline six laws. It's the slowest start to legislation that we've had in going back 30 to 40 years. So, I know of 4. I did not read that article, so I'm not sure what the other 2 were, that the Senate actually passed, that we also passed. But 2 of those were the ESTA, the Earned Sick Time Act, reforms to that, and the governor signed those in February, and then the Tipped Wage Act and readjust minimum wage, and then 2 laws that fix the issue with reporting that we're required to do because the Secretary of State's website was not working inoperable. So,
Don't look at me.
I'm not, I'm sure if you were running it would have worked, but it was a nightmare. We would try to go in and we're required to do this transparency reporting, and we could not do it. And so, there was legislation passed to allow an extension on that, and then that we could file a PDF form and submit that. So, those are the 4 I know of. I don't know what the other 2 were. I'm curious, but maybe the Senate passed a couple things and she signed them right before we left.
Other questions?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Rep. Works for coming in today. Hillsdale County is trying to move forward on materials management. Process is very cumbersome. It's been a challenge as far as trying to follow the chart that Eagle has provided. It's what I have discussed with Eagle is it looks good on paper, but it's a disaster for rural counties trying to meet the standards that they're imposing on us. Funding has been promised for 3 years, but what is the outlook for even continuing either with materials management as a process or the funding that's being forced on the rural counties? This is just very difficult. It's something that will have costs associated with it to establish. When the funding is gone, we will still have those costs to maintain whatever programs, and it's quite frankly a nightmare.
Yeah, can you clarify a little bit? I'm not super familiar with this, issue, but is it, when you're talking, is it waste as far as,
Materials management is all inclusive of recycling, trying to.
trash,
All the
recycling?
trash,
Okay.
yeah, so trying to reduce the amount and reuse, and whether it's food waste or plastics, metal, all the different things, having the process in place in a rural community. If you're in Wayne County, Oakland County, Washtenaw County, Kent County, Saginaw County, those populated areas already have processes, Washtenaw County, in place to do these programs. The mindset is different. In the rural communities, there's 40 of that are rural communities that do not necessarily have the mindset. So much of materials management, the goal from Eagle that we're thrust with is to establish and put in place programs that will reduce the amount of actual trash.
Mhm.
However, the mechanisms in our communities aren't in place. In order to do that, we have to spend dollars that initially, and it's $60,000 a year. That's practically nothing, when you start talking about expenses to accomplish what we're being asked to do. In fact, just for example, in Scipio Township, I believe, they had to put a cover over one of their waste bins because the rain would cause the water to seep, so they had to put a roof over it. Well, it's a $20,000 roof. $60,000 doesn't last. We do not have a materials management department in Hillsdale County. We don't have staff that are hands-on dealing with the questions in order to accomplish. The funding of having even a part-time, Steve digs into that $60,000, of which all of a sudden, and in fact, we haven't seen any of the $60,000 to date, So I'm wondering what the future is of materials management as a mandate from the state of Michigan, and how we are expected to deal with the funding of this new hardship, funding hardship.
Yeah, I would love to probably talk with you in greater detail. We can set an appointment to talk about this, but here's what I can tell you is that, I think we are committed in the House to, rein in Eagle's funding. And one of the proposals that's been made through, the budgetary appropriations process is that we put in force through the budget response times, and that if they have not approved something or communicated with you, that you're allowed to proceed after 180 days. Because we're hearing huge problems, that the response time, the number of FTEs, that's full-time employees that they're supposed to have, that they've been taking funding in the budget for, and then not actually employing those people is quite large. And so Representative Bolin, who's chair of our appropriations committee, has been on this. We call her the Vosges of Michigan. She's looking at what are areas that are problems and how can we cut funding or put requirements in the budget that hold those departments accountable. And so that's something I would be glad to talk with you further about and kind of hear your feedback. I do know we've put forth legislation with some biodigesters and permitting those and making that more readily available in the state. There's a huge issue right now in northern Michigan, and as I said, was up there this weekend with all the leftover trees and debris left from this winter, and they're fighting Eagle on some good connections with Northern Michigan representatives because we have a lot of the same issues. The rural challenges that we face, that they face. I said it should be Northern Caucus plus a Southern. So, and so that's been very helpful, and so I will be glad to speak with you and see what we can do to resolve that. Do you guys, can I ask you, partner with any other county right
We
now?
have attempted to do that, we outreach Lenawee County, Jackson, and Branch County as well as St. Joe. And the collaboration was something that was a possibility that was not accepted. So we are a single county application of our materials management.
Because Branch and St. Joe are partnering, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah, I do remember this last year.
Yeah, we tried to do a 3 and it just didn't work out.
And it would have fit nicely because we could have niched it into our health department, which we already have an agreement in place. They already do it, they have an environmental division under the health department. And just, it would have been a very nice fit, but we just couldn't make it.
And do you still have an operable waste management transfer station here in the city?
Yeah,
Two.
yes,
We won the city and then Jefferson County.
Okay,
yes.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you for your help.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Back to the appropriations discussion and debate, I thank you for submitting, a earmark request for the county parks. Any thought in those negotiation processes as to if any earmarks will be funded this year in the legislative process?
So if I could give you a demonstration as we've been told. Here's the funding, okay? We're gonna fund education, we're gonna fund roads, which are gonna be significant funding increases. And then here's what's gonna be left over to divvy up. Of that, and the things that, the requests, as he's mentioning, what we put in house rules this year is that if you're gonna request an earmark or a pork project, however you wanna call those, that it had to be put in by a legislature, you had to own it, you had to put your name on it, and then, that goes through the appropriations process, and it has to be government or nonprofit, cannot be going to a private company. There's been issues in the past with this, and they've oftentimes snuck in, like we just kind of saw federally, some things, at the end of a budget get snuck in. And so, these have all been submitted, you can go, there's a website actually where you can see them. So, Commissioner, to your question, my understanding is the priorities are gonna be, infrastructure and safety. And so, those are the things that are going to get prioritized. So, we shall see, that the Hillsdale Hospital also submitted a request in your county. I think I submitted 6 or 8, somewhere like the city of Bronson, they have a huge issue when we talk about infrastructure of, sewage. And Eagle came in last year with some of the high rain levels we had and said, whoa, your sewage is, overflowing and, you're gonna have to fix that. And that process that they started in trying to put a sleeve in has been, it's cost them a lot more than they expected. They were gonna try to fix old clay, tile that their sewage is running through that has cracks in it and it's not going well. And so then they started this sleeve process and, $2 million was gone. And so that's one probably that, for example, that may see a higher priority. So, that doesn't give you much of an answer other than I don't know.
Any other questions?
And I think I will add, the other unknown that we were waiting on is what was gonna happen federally and what changes how that's going to play in, and, Congressman Wahlberg, as I said, was just at our last meeting. I think there's a lot of things that are being said right now that just aren't necessarily accurate, and we're gonna see how this shakes out. But the state of Michigan did, buy in kind of to the Medicaid funding plan several years ago. That's probably not sustainable at the state level now. So we're going to have to figure out how that's another piece of that pie you know, hopefully with some of these work or volunteer requirements, 20 hours a week, will help in for education opportunities to help some people figure out another path for gaining full-time employability, or at least getting involved in volunteering in their community, and maybe starting to offset some of the cost of government, which is what we want, right? We want smaller government, that's our goal. All right, thank you.
You're welcome to stay as long as you can.
I will stay for a little bit, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Kevin, I believe you're up.
Well, I only had one meeting in the last 2 weeks, which is unheard of, and Rebecca Burns was here at our last meeting and gave the update and covered what our meeting was about. The only other thing I got is when I was coming into the meeting today, on 99, it does say that on 7/14, the city of Jonesville, it looks like it's gonna start working on 12. Cause it says road work starting 7/14, that's the only thing I can think that's gonna be happening. Cause it's coming downhill, and I would imagine they're gonna start the road diet next Monday. So it might be a little congested through there. And they are going out, I think, paving out 99 in the town. So, one or the other, something's gonna be messed up down there.
Yeah, I thought the road diet in Jonesville was, scheduled for 26.
No, that's this year,
Okay,
from everything I've got from them.
That's what I think I've heard too.
okay.
Yeah, that's all I have.
Any questions for Kevin? All right, Brad, your turn.
Thank you very much. Really brief report. Commissioner Wiley and I met with the Lenawee County Administrator on July the 1st, furthering our discussions in regard to the Office of the Medical Examiner. We covered a number of issues which we mutually share in regards to a proposed partnership with Jackson County. And really at the end of the day, what it comes down to is that there are a few solutions available to us that do not involve some form of partnership with Jackson County. So to that, we are currently trying to schedule a meeting with the Jackson County Administrator and Assistant Administrator either for late August or early September. And so I would like to do that earlier because of our budgeting process, so that we would have some numbers, because it is probably, whatever what agreement we come to, it probably is going to require some increased funding for the medical examiner line item, but we continue to make progress on that. Prosecutor's office reported, I believe yesterday, they did hire a new receptionist. That just kind of echoes a theme that I have noted, management personnel from all of our departments, that it does seem to be easier to hire employees. We're not having those long-term vacancies, and I'm sure that reflects the current employment situation, that we have a little tighter job market, and employees are a little bit easier to find. But I would also like to think that some of the things that we have done as an employer with our compensation study and working to bump those pay rates up, that has also helped as well in regards to getting those positions filled a little bit quicker. Community corrections will meet Wednesday at 5 p.m. I have a full slate of township meetings this week and Village North Adams last week. And all but 2 of my townships will meet this week. 911 board coming up on the 16th. Fire Association will meet July the 20th. That's all that I have for you, unless there's questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll move along. Brad, you're up.
Resolution 25-094. Whereas the Hillsdale County Drain Commissioner has delegated authority by the Hillsdale County Board of Commissioners under Part 307 of the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act, Act 451 of 1994, as amended, Part 307, has jurisdiction to maintain the normal lake level of Bear Lake, and whereas a special assessment 324.30704, and whereas the Drain Commissioner held a public hearing on June 25th, 2025, to review the computation of cost of a lake level project and a corresponding special assessment role consistent with the requirements of Part 307, MCL 324.307142, and whereas after considering input from the public hearing, the Drain Commissioner presented the computation of cost of the project and the special assessment role to the board for final approval. Now therefore be it resolved, the board approves the computation of cost of the project and the special assessment role as presented by the Drain Commissioner. The special assessment role with the assessment listed shall be the final and conclusive unless appealed in a court within 15 days of the adoption of this resolution. That's MCL 324.30714, subsection 4. The Hillsdale County Clerk shall forward to the Drain Commissioner a copy of this resolution so that action can be instituted on the project in an expedient manner. All resolutions and parts of resolutions insofar as the same that may be in conflict herewithin are hereby rescinded. I move for adoption.
Support.
Ken, you support
You're fine.
Whichever one.
You're fine.
Just for the record, thank you. All right, discussion?
And again, a reminder, we have provided the upfront funding for this through the loan action that we took at our last meeting, and this will be paid back over 5 years. Unless the property owners want to pay that full assessment upfront, they'll have the opportunity to do.
Remind me, what is their interest rate if they take it over time?
I believe we were 3.74%.
Right, you just,
So they do have the option of paying that upfront. Okay. Further questions? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Leininger,
Yes.
Commissioner Ingles,
yes.
Commissioner Collins,
Yes.
Commissioner Wiley,
Yes.
Commissioner Benson.
Yes.
Sounds like passed 5-0. All right, please continue.
Mr. Rickman here, our finance director, in our packet was the financials, I believe, for the end of June, so I don't know if any commissioners on the expenditure report have questions for him. I do also want to let the board know, Mr. Rickman notified me on the 30th of June, our auditor had lost some staff in the last couple of weeks, and so was unable to get the audit completed and filed in the state of Michigan by June 30th. We applied for an extension, and we applied for a 7-day extension, and were granted I believe a 30-day extension, Derek. So, but that will be filed in the near future. So, Derek, if you want to come up for any questions on the finance expenditure report.
So one of the requirements of that extension is I have to notify the board in writing within 10 days. So this is just me doing that. Also attached to this is the approval of the extension from the state.
Go ahead.
Commissioner Leininger, a question.
Go ahead.
Would it be appropriate, Commissioner Leininger, that we acknowledge this some way in our minutes, either a motion to accept this letter from the finance director, just so that we're documenting that he did officially notify us?
I don't know if the statute requires us to take action on that, Commissioner, so.
I was going to upload it, so it'll be part of
It'll be
it.
fine.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to document so that our finance director is covered, that he has done the proper notification. Thank you.
And we do provide a very long, detailed recording of our commissioner meetings on YouTube, so
the board's aware, another one of the requirements was that I submit a unadjusted trial balance to the state, which they have posted, on the documents, website that they keep. And I'll just express, I was a little frustrated. I had no indication that we wouldn't have it in until about noon on Monday. So that was a little frustrating for me, but I did go ahead and submit the, extension request, just because it, it's pertinent to the county that we not have a late audit, so. Any questions on the expenditure report?
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. While the target is 50%, and overall, I see we're at 41.84%, there are several items that are running over budget that are maintenance and ongoing type items that look to me like, as we go through, those departments are gonna be spending even more money.
Yeah, I can go through those really quickly if you'd like. The building maintenance, for the Lifeways and Michigan Works building, they've used about 51% of their budget through June. Maintenance is not necessarily an indication that they'll go over. You fix something once and maybe you're good for the rest of the year. But theoretically, there's potential there that one could go over budget. The county survey and monumentation grant, that's 100% reimbursed. So anything that they go over, we will get reimbursed for. Buildings and grounds, they had some courthouse HVAC expenses that were pretty substantial in the first half of the year. They're at 52% of their budget. Again, if things are smooth in the second half, they might make up for that. They've also had a little bit of turnover in their department that could potentially make up for that as well. The FOC building maintenance, I wasn't sure, I didn't get a chance to talk to the maintenance director yet on this one, but I did see that there was a new door that was purchased, and some bathroom repairs. I don't have any more detail on that other than I saw the invoice for them. Health department, building maintenance, again, that's 100% reimbursed by the health department, so anytime they enlist our department, our county to do any work out there, they pay for it. So you see revenue making that up on the revenue side. Life insurance is tracking about $1,200 over budget. Sometimes when we budget for health insurance, we go by how many people they've averaged being covered over the last 6 months. If the department's fully staffed for the entire year, it can cause a little bit over there. So I'm tracking them to be about 1,200 over budget on that. And that's just, that's nobody's fault. It's just what it is. Circuit court budget, if you recall, when they requested their budget, they requested a large increase to legal fees, jury fees, mileage, significantly over their prior year budget. We didn't grant them the entire amount that they requested, just because it's a variable expense. The hope was they wouldn't need it. They have needed it. That budget will likely be over budget. It'll be driven entirely by jury trials. Probate court is 1.3% over budget right now. Similar situation. They requested a few increases to some of their contractual services, like reporting fees. We hope that they would not require it. They have needed it. Jury board, obviously, if jury trials are up, I think the jury board kind of correlates with that. Sheriff's office, they've had a lot of vehicle repair maintenance, more than we've anticipated, and they are tracking 2% over budget. And the jail has had a lot of inmate healthcare due to overcrowding at the jail, due to having more people there than what we really anticipate. They're tracking 4% over budget, which is the most significant overage in our budget. Nothing else is tracking over at this moment. Doesn't mean that, something can't come up that changes that. One of the reasons we're so far below what our target is, about 41.8%, is, again, we budget for every position to be filled for every day of the year. That just isn't the case, and it creates us a little bit of
The other key thing on that too, is the appropriations transfer out figure, that where we transfer money out to the child care fund, transfer money out to, the capital improvement fund. Those are all done at the end of the year.
at one time, so it's
At a one-time transaction, so you'll notice that that line is severely under budget, but it's a very large item of that budget.
Jared, just a couple things, and I don't know if you can embellish it all on them, but since Sheriff Department is, a really big chunk of our budget, in your notes there, you've got radio equipment repair under the one line item. I know that the sheriff was very good in, getting a couple back-to-back grants to buy all new radio equipment, and I don't know if you can speak at all to, what those costs were involved in. The other is just pointing out our inmate healthcare. We heard again today about, unserved warrants and the lack of jail space, but we also have to remember, if we house those inmates, from the time that we put cuffs on them, we're responsible for their healthcare. So,
and eating them too.
Yeah,
Food costs, I didn't write on here, but
Yeah,
that's also tracked.
yeah. And so, that number is up, and I don't know if you can embellish on those two line items at all or not, as far as to break them out.
I don't want to speak on the radio equipment repair without doing some more
Sure.
digging. There's a chance that there was some new radios purchased in that line as well, just maybe it got hit to the wrong line, but I want to double check that before I committed to that. I can write something up on those two and submit them to you, with the help of the sheriff.
Okay,
if you
that,
want.
I would just like to, because it's running that much over, and it's no fault of the sheriff, if they're, those inmates that have healthcare needs, we have to address them. That's our obligation, but I'm just interested because that is part of an ongoing discussion that we have in regards to what do we do about the jail.
Yes. And just to note, another slightly contributing factor to the jail, which I also didn't write on here, they purchased $31,000 worth of bulletproof vests. We budgeted for that out of our capital expense, and currently that expense is showing in their budget, where there's not a budget for it, so we just need to do, journal entry to match the expense up with where the budget was.
Don't we get reimbursed on that?
We get
as
reimbursed
well?
half of it, which we also
Yeah.
have not received that
Okay.
yet, but
So,
I
yeah.
did see that it was submitted for, we're just waiting on the money to arrive.
So that makes that $31,000 a little bit more capital.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I do have another question. It's okay.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the grant cycle, with some of the grants that we have, in particular with, community corrections and, drug court and so on, they cycle so that, some of them do expire and then they're renewed. Do we have any of those grants that will be expiring that you're aware of that will not be renewed, that we will need to absorb?
Not that I'm aware of. I do know that drug court just got renewed, for 3 of their state drug court grants, for very similar dollars to what they had this year. Keep in mind, their cycle runs October 1 through September 30th. So a lot of their deadlines for submitting that is April, May timeframe, and then they hear back about now. There's still some that we just don't know because they don't apply for until later in the year, like road patrol, marine patrol. I take that back, there is one I know of. Marine patrol grant, was not given this year. And that's about a $10,000 expense to the county. So we won't have that revenue coming in, for that expense. The sheriff told me, you know, I gotta do what I gotta do in that situation. I can't just, you know, cut that part of my budget out, so, yeah, that's the only one I know of for so far.
And we were running a rate, I know for a fact that we did have those officers out. We were running a rate.
There was an opportunity, and I don't know the time frame, so I'm not meant to ruffle feathers here, but there was an opportunity for another grant, but it required a match. And the time frame for the sheriff, from the sheriff finding out about it and being able to follow the policy that required board approval for any grants that require a match, he wasn't able to meet, so he didn't get the application in for that grant. That potentially could have saved, you know, $4,000 or $5,000.
Any other questions for Derek? Thanks, Derek. Any other questions for Brent?
Just, I'm still waiting to hear from the ambulance agency. Commissioner Collins and I presented them with some dates as to when we could meet to start looking at negotiations for those contract renewals for 2026 and beyond. Have not heard back on any of those dates yet, so.
And to that, Commissioner, I did share with Commissioner Collins, I know that there is a new agreements in place in St. Joe County and also in Branch County, and passed on the information so that you might be able to look at some of those other county agreements that might be similar in population and demographic makeup of Hillsdale County, so that we can see what other counties are doing in that regard.
Anything else? Comments or questions for Brent? Okay. All right, let's see. Item 4.4 is pulled. I will read. Resolution 25-093, opposing the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services plan to implement a competitive procurement process for prepaid inpatient health plans. Let's see here. Whereas the state of Michigan currently operates a publicly managed and community-based system for delivering specialty behavioral health services through 10 prepaid inpatient health plans, PHIPs, which oversee Medicaid, mental health, developmental disability, and substance use disorder services. And whereas this PHP system has demonstrated consistent success through local accountability, strong community partnerships, and an in-person centered recovery-focused approach to care, while managing costs responsibly and improving outcomes for vulnerable populations. And whereas the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services has announced its intent to pursue a competitive procurement process for PHIPs functions, opening the door to private, non-public entities potentially assuming management over behavioral health services. And whereas such a shift risks undermining decades of work in building trusted, locally governed systems of care and could disrupt the relationships among community mental health service programs, providers, and the communities they serve. And whereas privatization may reduce transparency, threaten continuity of care, and weaken the vital community voice that has been foundational to Michigan's public behavioral health system. And whereas the stakeholders across the state, including individuals receiving services, family members, advocates, providers, and local leaders have voiced strong opposition to this plan, citing its potential harm to quality, access, and local decision-making. And whereas the proposed restructuring would result in significantly higher administration costs, up to 15% for private entities, compared to the current 2% average under public PHIPs, diverting hundreds of millions of dollars away from direct care and into overhead or profit margins. And whereas under this model, decisions about care delivery, service authorization, and resource allocation could be made not only outside the communities served, but potentially by organizations based outside the state of Michigan, removing vital local knowledge and responsiveness from the system. And whereas Hillsdale County and its Board of Commissioners remain committed to a system that is publicly governed, locally controlled, and focused on the unique needs of each community we serve. Now therefore be it resolved that the Hillsdale County Board of Commissioners formally oppose the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services plan to implement a competitive procurement process for prepaid inpatient health plans. And be it further resolved that the Hillsdale County Board of Commissioners urges Governor Gretchen Whitmer, the Michigan Legislature, and MDHHS to halt this process and instead engage directly with the CMHSPs, PIHPs, service users, and other stakeholders to strengthen Michigan's existing public behavioral health system. And be it further resolved that Hillsdale County Board of Commissioners directs its resolution to be shared with the Governor's Office, MDHHS, the Michigan Senate, and the House delegations representing our region, Community Health Association of Michigan, and all partner CMHSPs and PIHPs across the state. I move for adoption.
Or,
Brent, you asked it to be pulled?
I did, and Commissioner, I can't support this today. I have not had enough time to research the MDHS's decision. And so I can't say that that's necessarily a bad decision. I do have some concern with the current structure of the PIHPs, and believe that we need to take a different approach here, even within our board of commissioners, to make sure that our appointment to that is not a member of the Lifeways Board. I feel that that truly is an issue that we need to address. The other issue is potentially, it says in here, potential increase in administrative costs. While you're going, the proposal, as I understand, is going from 10 administrations down to 3. You may see an increase in the administrative cost in those 3 agencies, but is it going to be comparable to the cost of the 10? So, ideally, I would say the PHIPs themselves ought to go away, because that would eliminate administrative overcost and just distribute those funds to the community mental health organizations. But again, because every step in the process, talk about cuts in funding or changes in funding model. Federal government distributes money to the state takes some of that money, administers it, distributes it to the PHIPs administer that money, distribute it to the community mental health agencies, the CMHs, administer that money, take a little bit and distribute it out to other entities to provide service. Somewhere we've got to change this whole model. And again, I
did forward to all of you Mac's response to a question I had. Mac also had an update on this situation in their legislative updates on 523, 516, and 411. They also sent a letter to the governor in May opposing this action. So, and there are several other counties now that have passed resolutions and sent them. So if you've been reading your updates from MAC, you'd have caught it back in May and April. I guess that's my only comment to you as far as you not knowing about it. But Brad, go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Commissioner Langer for pulling this because I had it on my list of things that you had not done. So just a couple of things. First of all, just the resolution itself, it's not in the format that we would normally use here within the county. There's no person introducing it, listed on here, it's just the vote of the commissioners. There's also a column for those who abstained, and as we all know, that you have to have a direct personal financial interest in order to be able to abstain from something. It's not something easy to do, so you can have that in there. I find kind of bad, but I guess the crux for me is looking at a plan to implement a competitive procurement process for prepaid inpatient health plans. And I would just refer us back to our own policies here within the county. That, if we're gonna spend over a certain dollar amount, we have to have competitive bids. And I don't know why, for any way, shape, or form, that we as a public body would be opposed to the idea of having open competitive bidding for anything that we're gonna buy with taxpayer dollars, whether they're federal taxpayer dollars, or state federal taxpayer dollars, or local taxpayer dollars. So, I can't support this resolution as it's presented just on that basis alone, because I'm not opposed to the idea that we have a competitive bidding process, and all things being equal, that there's an RFP for it, and these are the conditions that you have to provide to. And there's watchdog agencies to look over to make sure that they're being provided at. And so I don't know that it's necessarily a bad idea. So I would be voting for it regardless, and I'm glad that it was polled and we had the opportunity to vote on it individually rather than as part of our consent.
So unfortunately, I don't think you've been reading Mac's updates.
I have been reading it. I've
Because
also,
one of the things that they have noted, and one of their objections, is that PHIPs and CMHs will not be allowed to bid on the process. So you're talking about the providers that are already in place not being exempt from being able to bid. So that is contrary to even the mental health code. So that's one of the issues, and that's why I brought it forward, because it's going against the mental health code right out of the gate. Because you're not gonna allow the CMHs that are already in place to bid on this? Something wrong with that picture in my book, but go ahead, Doug.
So when I read a resolution that says that therefore be it resolved, so on and so forth, to implement a competitive procurement process, when I hear a statement like that, I think that by going through a bid process, you improve the price you're gonna pay, and you improve the services you're gonna get. So when I read the statement as part of the resolution, I think a competitive procurement process is a good thing. That brings others into the fray, so to speak, that may not be present or available to become a provider. So when I read the resolution as it's written, I see that to implement a competitive procurement, I think that's a good thing. Understanding what you just said, but it's part of our resolution.
But also, if you read the other part there, that it encourages the governor and the legislature to engage directly with the CMHs, the PHIPs, service users, and other stakeholders to to improve and strengthen Michigan's existing public behavioral health system. So you can't cherry pick one thing out, because if you read the whole thing, you know, the resolution isn't necessarily saying we shouldn't be competitive, but we need to involve the stakeholders to find what is the best way to do this. If you will remember, a few years ago, more than a few, but Senator Shirkey tried privatizing the mental health system, and it failed because of some of the opposition to privatizing. One is insurance companies are gonna be the winner in that, you know, in that formula that was presented. But this is an effort by DHHS to privatize. I mean, simply put, because they're taking away any of the ability of the CMHs or the PHIPs. Now,
So there are elements to me of this resolution that I cannot accept, so that's my comment.
mhm. Any other comments? Roll call vote.
Commissioner Engels,
No.
Commissioner Collins,
Yes.
Commissioner Wiley,
Yes,
Commissioner Benton,
No.
Commissioner Leininger.
No,
fails 3-2. Alright. Let's see, I think a lot of the things I had wrote down here, Brad and I worked on together as the, management and personnel, so I think he's covered it, the, ME and the other items, so. And we did stress trying to get it done as soon as possible with, medical examiner, and Brad already mentioned that we were concerned, and so was Kim, was
Yes.
from Glenaway, as far as getting these figured out so that we can budget accordingly, so. And Lifeway's monthly board meeting is next Wednesday at 7 PM at Hillsdale, this month. So, Brent, you had asked, we always add a closed session for, discussion on labor negotiation.
I would move that we go into closed session pursuant to MCL 15.268, section 8C, for strategy and negotiation connected with the negotiation of a collective bargaining agreement.
I'll support that.
And I would move that we do that effective 11:45. So we take a short recess after this and ask that Ms. Greenman join us in that closed session if approved.
Okay. Voice vote?
Roll call.
Roll, well,
It must
that's
be
right,
roll call.
we are required roll call.
Before we do that, just in general, so that the public knows, 20 minutes?
Or less.
Yeah, or less. It's not gonna take too long to
The
stretch.
public comment will follow.
Yes, correct, correct. All right, roll call.
Commissioner Collins,
Yes.
Commissioner Wiley,
Yes.
Commissioner Benton,
Yes.
Commissioner Leininger,
Yes.
Commissioner Engels.
Yes.
All right, we'll take a short break, we'll reconvene for a closed session at 11:45. The only ones in the